Welcome to Blue Collar Conversations, live from the Blue Boar in Westminster. And I'm joined today by Andrea Jenkyns and I'm joined today by Phil Davies. But this is the part of the programme where we hear what you've been saying, what your opinions are. And I have to say, we put a poll out yesterday. Would you be willing to pay more to buy British? 7,000 of you voted and 94% of you said yes, you would be prepared to pay more. So we've got Smudge Smith 913s, an absolute no-brainer. Anything of British origin is on our shopping list. We go to the local butcher, we get everything locally, as our government should do. Supporting the country is a duty during times like this. If they need something engineering, find a British company to do it. And Duff and Custard, we want to, so bring in legislation so we know the origin and the manufacturer is clearly shown on all products. Wilfred Johnson, yes, we do want to support British businesses. Is that why when we brought in our new dark blue passport, it was made in Poland by a Franco-Dutch company? Questions to answer on that one. An uncivil servant, in principle, yes, but only so long as there is a legitimate reason for the additional cost to do so. Well, today I'm with two Yorkshire MPs, and I'm not one to stereotype, but they're always keen on the cost and want value for money. And one of them I know better than the other, and that's Philip Davies. Philip, would you be prepared to pay more to buy British?
Absolutely not. I couldn't hold my head up in Yorkshire having admitted that I'd be prepared to pay more for anything, to be perfectly honest. No, I mean, in all seriousness, if it was better quality, then absolutely. But, you know, I wouldn't be prepared to sort of say, well, I'm just going to pay more for a British product, even if it's exactly the same as another one. I think the onus is on the British company to make themselves cost effective and to be able to compete. I don't believe in sort of subsidising companies to make them inefficient. I think they need to be efficient companies to compete around the world.
I think, you know, that was the point that Uncivil Servant was making. However, what everybody else is saying, hence the 94% in the vote there, was, look, we're going through really tough times. You know, COVID has turned the world on its head. And a bit like locally, we supported everybody as best we could in the local community. We need to do the same thing to get us out of what is here a recession. And how do we do that? We support local people. And I have to say, I would, you know, I don't mind that. I would pay a few pennies more. I'm the opposite side of the pennines to you. and I would pay, because I think that to me is important to build the country back up. Where are you on this, Andrew? You don't want to become between a domestic. Obviously, it's domestic. Not even married 2 weeks and we can't agree on anything. But go on.
I agree with you, Esther. You know, we're going through a tough time. Our economy's having a tough time through COVID. And we've got to back Britain, back British, to get the country back on its feet. And let's not forget, you know, during the lockdown, we all shopped a lot more locally. I was shopping at the local farm shop a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to do that. Yeah. But we've also got to be mindful, you know, we've all, in our constituencies, we've got constituents who couldn't necessarily afford to do that. So it has got to be value for money. It has got to be a whole range of affordable products, because we've got to, you know, think of to make sure that people can get the goods that they need.
Yeah, because what you wouldn't want to be saying is people taking advantage of the good nature of the British public. We're all thinking we're helping somebody and then they're putting a premium on the cost. I think that wouldn't be right. And like you say, we're all working to a budget. Whatever that budget is, we're all working to it.
But especially during, you know, the COVID recession, if we're getting job losses and everything, we don't want to be putting more pressure on actually the household's income where somebody might have lost a job. So I think it's getting the balance right. Yes, where we can, we must back Britain, but at the same time be mindful of those who are struggling as well.
See, a moderate debate. You might not have expected that here. And Philip Davies, you're in the minority there.
As usual. As usual.
Do you want to come back with anything?
No, look, I just don't think it helps any British company to encourage them to be flabby as a business and not cost effective, because ultimately we want to be, with the whole thing about Brexit, is we can trade around the world, and if we want those companies to sell their products around the world, they're going to have to be as efficient. And what I don't want to do is to encourage businesses to say, oh, actually, it doesn't matter how inefficient you are, we're still going to by British, that actually in the long run that doesn't help any of those British companies. What helps them is saying, look, you've got to be as cost effective as any other business around the world.
Yeah, so you're looking at a bigger picture. Actually, yes, we do want to support British, and then we want them to be global. Let's look at exporting. Let's look at those free trade agreements, and we can only get those in place, and other people will only want to buy our produce if it is good quality produce. And I have to say, British brands are known around the world invariably as a good quality. But obviously, what the big issues were today, and front page on the Express today was, Priti Patel saying we'll deport grooming gangs. That was obviously questions that had come up from, West Yorkshire. We've been there, spoken to Robbie Moore. That was an issue with him, but her key point was that the Conservative Party has to be the party of law and order. Can we say that at the moment? Are we, Philip?
Well, certainly much more the party of law and order than the Labour Party is, but that's not a high bar. We need to do an awful lot more. We need to repeal an awful lot of the things that Labour did when they were in government that 10 years on we still haven't done. So, just as a prime example, Labour introduced a policy where it was compulsory to be released halfway through your prison sentence. It didn't matter how badly you behaved in prison, whether you were still a risk to the public or not. It was the law of the land that you had to be released halfway through your prison sentence. And that law is still in place. We haven't repealed it. We've modified it a bit for certain crimes, but fundamentally that law's still in place. And I think as a Conservative government we should be ashamed of ourselves that we're still sticking to a policy that people are compulsory release from prison halfway through the prison sentence. That's just not good enough.
Well, you've campaigned for that for a while, honesty in sentencing. If somebody is getting a sentence that fits the crime, then we expect, don't we, as the public, that they are serving all of that. People have been writing in here. I've got Smoggy in Hull. You need to crack down on all criminals, not just the ones who use violence. Let's have a deterrent and proper justice handed out by the courts. Justice for the victims, and not ensuring the perpetrator gets an easy soft sentence might be a good place to start. Now, Andrea, you've got a very clear view on this, haven't you? If you've committed what you call a serious crime, then you'd say I'd throw the book at you. Yes. And what about sort of maybe crimes that, do you think, does that fit a sentence? Should they be in prison, or should they be getting more role models, more education, restorative justice?
Okay. Firstly, I agree with Priti. I think our justice system should be colourblind, actually. A crime is a crime, no matter what background you are, what gender you are. A crime is a crime, and we should be believing strong sentencing. And for example, I think that, with child killers, life should mean life. And with paedophiles, life should mean life. I'm sorry, but I don't want to see people like that released onto the street. But at the same time, it's getting the balance right. And if we look in prison, like when I was a parliamentary candidate, I worked with some former prisoners within the looking at a reforming mechanism, helping people to get back into society. But if you look at the stats, a high number of people in prison cannot even read or write, and there's a high number of people who come from care. So we do need to make sure, actually, get the balance right, that these people in prison, if they're committing a lot minor crimes, they've got the skills to then go out, and make their way in life, that they can read, they can write, and then they can go on to get a job. But at the same time, it's getting the balance right. I think prevention's better than cure. We've got to have strong sentencing, and rather than, like Philip said, this crazy thing that Labour brought in where people can not do their full sentence. Life has got to mean life, and these sentences, people have got to actually be doing the full sentences. And
I think that comes through sort of a very clear message. And I agree in sort of clarity and discipline, so you know what's going to happen to you. So if you do break the law, life is going to be difficult for you if you've got a criminal
Yes,
record.
completely.
It is going to be difficult to get a job. It is going to be difficult later on in life. So how do we help you at the very start, which goes back to your prevention, and you're doing so much on social mobility with the report you've got going out. How do you get people at the start of their life to understand it is a lot easier, this journey, if you go this way and not that way? And how do we provide that education, get people engaged? We were talking about that earlier in the week on Monday, about how do you get kids interested in a subject for something they want to do, because this is shocking, and this today was something that was brought up by an MP. He could not believe it. The father was in tears. And he said, my kid, only 13, he said, oh, I know what I want to do when I'm older. I want to be a drug dealer. He found that as an easy way to earn money because of county lines and the ease and the accessibility of it. That should be quite clear. That isn't a path to follow. There are consequences to that. There are lives that you are shattering, and there will be a long sentence, and there won't be sort of cash at the end of the journey for you. Philip, you're looking serious. You're looking at me.
Yeah,
there,
I mean, it's sad,
nodding.
isn't it? It's sad, isn't it, when that's people's aspiration is to be a drug dealer. But of course, what they do is they may be on a poor estate. They might look at somebody who's driving a flash car or whatever, and they think, well, I want some of that. And what do they do? That's what they're doing. And the only way, really, the best way to counter that is actually for that person to be in prison for a long period of time, to have all of their assets confiscated off them, so that there isn't anything there for them to aspire to, because they've got no freedom and they've got no money because it's all been taken away from them. And that's why being tough on crime is really important, not just to keep communities safe and to properly punish people and all the rest of it, but also to make sure that those 13-year-old kids don't look up to drug dealers and think, actually, that is an easy way to make money. We've got to make sure that it's not an easy way to make money.
And the stats don't actually ring true with that. If there's a fantastic book, Why Is It That Most Drug Dealers, like this kid's thinking, is still living with the mum? Because they get hooked into a life that does not go anywhere. It just takes them down a perilous path to nowhere. They're being spun a lie, and actually that life isn't going to be what this kid thinks that it is going to be. How it's going to play out, because it isn't at all. What we got here, I think this is a message to us. This is Lou Mack, I think it is, Lou Mack 48, and it says, come on, the Conservative Party, you don't need to be talking about it, you need to be doing it now. You need to be getting on and making those sentences stricter, making sure people are paying that full time in prison. Are we doing that, Philip?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's been tough over the last 10 years because, from 2010 through to 2019, we didn't really have a majority in Parliament. There was no majority in Parliament to do any of these things.
Is that just an excuse?
No. I think that there was we were in coalition with the Lib Dems. Well, we all know how soft on crime the Lib Dems were. They were never going to go along with all that. Theresa May after 2017 had no majority at all in Parliament. We didn't have a majority to do those things. And I think people aren't stupid. They understand that makes it difficult for us to do that. We no longer have that excuse. We've got a majority of 80 in Parliament. And so Lou Mack is absolutely right. We need to be cracking on with these things. We need to make sure we are toughening up sentences. We are making sure prisoners serve their sentences in full. All of these things, we should be doing these things. And to be fair, we've got a fantastic Home Secretary who really believes in this, and so there's no excuse for us not to be cracking on. So I share that frustration.
Yeah, and again, people have written in about immigration. When's that coming through? Well, that is going to be the start of the new year. And again, don't talk about it, get on with it. Well, we're now going to be running a poll with the Express. And this is the question for today. Does prison work? So that's the question. So visit the Express, express.co.uk/prisons. Does prison work? Does prison work?
I think it's on the individual. It does with some people, but not with everybody. This is why it's getting the balance right. And I think it's the messaging as well. I mean, if we look during the recent protests, what's gone on during lockdown, the Black Lives Matters group, the anti-mask group, I think that we need to make sure that, whichever group is breaking laws, whether it's actually damaging our public property or whatever, law breaking is law breaking, and everybody should be treated the same way in the justice system. So I think we need to make sure that the police are treating everybody the same as well. Because I mean, I think we've got this left wing bias as well. So which can hamper the decision making on like we saw with the grooming gangs. Under previous administrations.
You think it was politically correct?
Yes,
Nobody
exactly.
dared speak about it.
Yeah.
And I think that was one thing, and why Blue Collar was set up in the first place. It was to say, look, nothing should be a taboo subject.
Yeah.
Things go wrong when you can't talk about it. So whether
crime is a crime in my books. And,
but you should be able to talk about it.
If there's a crime, there should be a punishment.
And you're right, in a place like Rochdale, people didn't want to speak about it. They didn't think that you were maybe singling out a group of people, and we shouldn't have that. We should have the ability to talk about it, but then we should work on the facts.
Yeah.
This is what was happening, these are the numbers, what are we doing? And then at the end of the day, how are we protecting, which somebody else said, the victim?
I also think as well, though, I mean, the police in sort of my area, they do great stuff in going into schools, etc. And you mentioned about the drug dealers. When I was working with these two former prisoners, they was trying to get through to the setting of a recruitment agency once they left for former prisoners to get them back into work and break the cycle of crime. And what they said, they were so when they spoke to the prisoners, they was very shocked to realise that they could get more doing a regular job quite often than they would with a drug dealing. And so I think education is so important, really. And like I said, the police officers going to the school, and it's having role models. You said about these poorer communities. When I was a counsellor, I had this thing called Role Model Day. It's not everybody wants to be an X Factor singer, for example.
Not if they've got my voice.
Yeah, we've actually got fantastic role models within our communities. So what I do is I'd bring vets, firemen with their fire engines, CEO from businesses, a whole mixture of people from our community to actually come into the school assemblies and actually speak and say, this is what we learnt at school, and this is actually relevant to our day-to-day life. So I think it's making sure education counts, and actually people leave school with not only being able to read and write and the basics, but actually having life skills to make their way in life. I think that's very important.
And everybody's on a journey. Your dad was a lorry driver, and you talk about you were doing like work experience and had a job in Greggs growing up, and then you did was it an online open university course?
I never went to university when I was younger. I went straight into work. I wanted to earn my way in life. And so what I did was, while I was fighting my seat, I did economics at the Open Uni and international relations at Lincoln's. I did two at once. And
Ask a busy woman.
Exactly. But education is so important, and the study I've been working on with a think tank that I'm director of is actually looking during COVID times, a school report on. And what we found is that people from poorer backgrounds, online learning is a lot more difficult because they haven't even got the Wi-Fi, let alone a laptop. So, we need to make sure that everybody has got these same opportunities in life to be able to learn, because I think the economy is changing. And more people are working from home now, as we've seen through COVID. And I'd like to see flexibility in our education system and the way that our education degrees are funded as well, because there's not much flexibility in there. And I think if people are doing more online learning and if we can really spearhead a lot more online degrees with our universities, then more people can access education. But we need flexibility in the funding, because if people want to take time off to look after a sick relative, to have a baby, to do work experience somewhere, to go travelling or whatever, we need flexibility in the funding system to allow people to do that.
And that comes down to our basic principles of value for money, doesn't it? I mean, why would you pay over £9,000 now to go to a university when you're doing it online? Get one for £1,000.
Yes.
You don't have the debt afterwards. You haven't lived away. And as I said, it opens up those opportunities to more people. Philip, where are you on the social mobility?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a conservative. I believe in social mobility. I think that it shouldn't matter what background you are, what colour you are, what religion you are, what sexuality you are. None of these things should be matter. We should be blind to all of these things. I mean, that's one of the damaging things of political correctness, this identity politics, is very damaging. We should be blind to all of those things. That's really what a tolerant country should be about. That nobody's interested in
And I
any of
don't
that.
think people quite get that, because I say, because we're a party of like choice, and because we're a party of opportunity, we don't need to say you are this, you are that, you are the other. We just appreciate that you're good at something. So you're quite right, that identity politics can be very divisive. We just say, come and join us, as it were, for what you bring to the table, irrespective of what you
all
are.
these sort of, I was dealing with the BBC yesterday at the Select Committee. They've got quotas on how many ethnic minority people they want on screen by 2020. All this kind of what. You see, they don't have a quota, as I point out. They don't have a quota of how many working class people they want to see at the BBC. They have these sort of. All these quotas things drive me mad, and it can, why, we end up in a situation where you get to a position where somebody you might have a, you have a quota for the number of women you want somewhere. Well, it may end up that you're replacing a sort of a wealthy middle class man with a wealthy middle class woman. Well, why does that wealthy middle class woman need more assistance than a working class boy from somewhere? All of this identity politics is very, very damaging. It damages social mobility, actually, because it's all about ticking boxes and all the rest of it. We should just be trying to give
And that went to
opportunity
the
people.
knob of the argument, didn't it? It was about diversity of opinion, diversity of view, and that's what, unfortunately, didn't happen at the BBC, and hence people are now saying it's biased, it's this, that, the other, because it kept drawing from the same group of people with the same mindset. Now, actually, this has come in for you, Philip Davies, LM 1949, time for Davies to stamp his authority on the BBC and get rid of that gobby lefty, whoever it was you were speaking to. I think that was something at the Select Committee yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I'll try to stamp my authority on the BBC, not with any great success as thus far. But the BBC is full of, it has a North London metropolitan view of the world. I don't actually think the BBC sets out to be biased. I don't think they go into work every day and say, how can we be biased? I think the trouble is that they have groupthink, where they're all from the same background, they all think the same thing, and therefore they presume everybody in the country thinks that. And really, my view always to the BBC is they need to get out more. They need to get out into the regions and find out what people in the real world think, rather than just their sort of politically correct virtue signalling friends in the BBC. So, I try, and the BBC is fighting for survival. I'd scrap the licence fee and let them crack on.
Well, to be fair, there was something that's come in about when we were talking about crime, and somebody said there's one way that they'd want to be soft on crime, and that is decriminalise the licence fees. So that was the only place that people have called in. Everybody else wants to be tough on crime, make sure there is good sentencing, but on this one, they would reverse it and decriminalise the licence fee.
Completely agree. And I completely agree with Philip as well regarding the BBC. It's inherently biased, and I think that if they want to be that way, then it should be privately funded. It shouldn't be the British taxpayer paying for this. It's wrong. So decriminalise that. It'll free up our courts to actually to sentence the real criminals, which is far more important.
Yeah, and it's really gathered a pace that people now looking at it, particularly how it served the over 75s, what it did there. People are now saying, well, hang on, is it value for money? Are we watching it? Do we now watch things online? Are we watching Netflix? Are we watching, sport on Sky or BT Sport? What is the purpose?
Well,
and
the
I
crazy
think
salaries as well. There's some
Gary
presenters.
Lineker and Zoe Ball.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
This is a taxpayer-funded organisation. That's ludicrous. Taxpayers' money should not go on that. If they want to work for Sky or some private organisation, fine, but that shouldn't come out of taxpayers' hard-earned cash.
Can I come back to the Daily Express
yeah, of course you can.
poll on does prison work?
Yes, we're just starting that now, so you're getting in there first to have your opinion heard.
Because I feel very strongly about this, and that prison does work. It was Michael Howard who famously, when he was Home Secretary, said prison works. And it's quite funny, there's all these left-wing organisations like the Howard League for Penal Reform who don't really want anyone to be sent to prison. I always wanted to set up a Michael Howard League for Penal Reform, which tried to get more people sent to prison. And it's a subject area that I've studied very, very closely. I ask hundreds of parliamentary questions about sentencing and all the rest of it. And all the evidence shows that prison does work. It works in a number of levels. First of all, as the prison population doubled in this country, the crime rate halved. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence,
No.
and it's pretty obvious, really, isn't it? I mean, this is common sense. The more criminals who are locked up in prison, the fewer criminals are out on the streets committing crimes. I mean, this is blindingly obvious stuff to most people, not to the, like I say, the metropolitan elite, but to everyday working people. They know that. The longer people spend in prison, and the Ministry of Justice produce these figures every quarter for people to see, the longer people spend in prison, the less likely they are to reoffend when they come out. So if prison didn't work, if prison was a problem, you'd think the opposite will be the case. But it's absolutely clear there's a straight line. The longer people spend in prison, the less
So I'm going
likely
to
they are
throw
to
something in
reoffend.
there, because what people will say is actually, it's helpful for people when they come back out to stay in contact with their family or the local community, and long sentences don't necessarily work. It breaks all of that down. So where does your rationale come from?
Actually, funnily enough, most people accept, even people who are hostile to prison, accept that long sentences lead to lower reoffending rates. The big argument is over short sentences, whether short prison sentences work, and some people will argue that what happens is you get lower reoffending rates when people do community sentences than when they have short prison sentences. But it's an absolute fallacy, and I want to explain why, because it really frustrates me, because the courts are desperate not to send people to prison. I mean, it is really difficult in this country to be sent to prison. I mean, try it. I mean, give it a go. I mean, you'll be shocked at how difficult it is.
Well, give us some examples.
Well, I'll give you an example. I asked parliamentary questions about. I actually once asked what was the maximum number of sentences offences that somebody had committed without being sent to prison, and the answer was about 750. Now, I asked people who have committed,
And most people don't know that, do they?
No.
Say that figure
It's
again.
about 750 previous
Offences
offences that somebody had
to get
committed and
committed.
still hadn't been sent to prison. There was, I asked a question about the people who'd committed more than 100 previous offences that went before the courts. And statistically, if you've committed 100 previous offences and you go before the courts, statistically, you are still more likely not to be sent to prison than to be sent to prison, even after committing 100 previous offences. So this is really difficult to be sent to prison. You only go there as a last resort when they've tried everything. So people who are given short prison sentences tend to have been given community sentence after community sentence after community sentence, and the only reason they're being given a short prison sentence is because they haven't worked and they're still reoffending. So for the cohort of people who get a short prison sentence, their reoffending rate on a community sentence is 100%. That's why they've been sent to prison. So even though short prison sentences you get about a 65 to 70% reoffending rate, that is still an awful lot better for those people than community sentences have worked out to be.
I think this is what you can do with stats in every way, isn't it? You can sort of give part information. So when you say that they've reoffended at a rate of 60%, you go, gosh, that isn't working, sending people to prison. But if you knew they had reoffended 100% on a community sentence, then you'd say, it has worked better. So there's something in that
There's also
short
an issue
sentence.
as well, actually. When people leave prison, they get given their £70-odd or whatever, and then they're just released back into the community, and we see that there's quite a high reoffending rate. And I do think this is a point in which we can try and reform them as well. There needs some support there and advice so they don't take the easy route. They go down to the pub, they're getting back into the drug line again and selling drugs. So we do need to use that small window of opportunity to stop them reoffending.
I mean, I think this is a really important point. People sometimes try and make it sort of a simplistic binary choice. Do you believe in punishment or do you believe in rehabilitation?
Yeah.
Well, I believe in both.
Yes, me too.
I believe in both. I think, people need to be properly punished for the crime that they've committed, and prison is a proper punishment for certain crimes. But also, there's no reason why people can't be rehabilitated whilst they're in prison.
Absolutely.
So it's a false choice. We should be aiming to do both.
And they should be able to, if they're, they've done the time and they want to, make a fresh start in life, they should have that ability as well.
Absolutely.
That's so important.
So this is an interesting question here. Does prison work? Because some people will also look at that question. It's a bit like every question. There are many questions in a question. People might say the way they have viewed, whether it's open prisons or how people are treated in prisons, and they say, is it cushy, and do they get a better sort of standard or quality of life in there than outside? So some people will view that. Is prison tough enough, or does it rehabilitate enough, or does it punish enough? So there's the one question there. But then there is the other one, does it work? And you give the stats, yes, if there were enough prison places, which again is another way, if there were enough prison places and enough people going for long enough period of time, it would work better. So I think we can, so I'm hoping when you say which way you think on this poll, whether you think it works or not, if you'd also email to tell us why you think it's working or not, or maybe you've got a personal story on why it's working or not, or do we just need more prison places?
Just one point on this about prison being soft and cushy, and I think many people would say that prisons are too cushy, and people have access to a gym and all this kind of stuff that they might not be able to afford if they're not in prison. I've got a lot of sympathy, but that prison should be a tough experience. It should be one that you don't want to repeat, really, in an ideal world. But I would say this, and I remember a chief Crown prosecutor telling me this when I went to see him, and he said to me, look, when people say prison's too cushy and actually the non-prison sentences are tougher, he said to me, when I was a prosecutor, no defence solicitor ever asked for their client to be sent to prison. Don't think it's that cushy. No criminal wants to be sent to prison, and that should tell you an awful lot about the fact that we should be wanting to send these people to prison.
I'd also like to come in with it's about tackling the small crimes as well. Remember Rudy, the mayor of New York, many years ago, how he the broken window effect. It's actually starting on these small crimes before younger people, whatever, progress to those more serious crimes. So I think it is actually getting them at that point as well, and making sure there's a consequence for their actions.
So that zero tolerance from the word go, and I think the police force would agree with that. Sometimes I think they might feel hampered that they can't do something, and what do they do here, and where does it go, and what was the point of all of that? We need to make sure, like you said, and I remember that, Mayor Giuliani, that it was zero tolerance, and then you didn't sort of escalate up because you don't really, you don't.
But also I think what's important as well is, we need to make sure that our police officers are protected, and when there's a crime against the police officers, they get the book thrown at them, because, we saw even in some of these marches, etc., how police officers getting beaten, etc. We should have zero tolerance with that. The police force, public servants are there to protect us. We should be protecting them.
Yeah. And we did actually campaign, us three in this room, and the rest of the blue collar MPs for the Commons. Yes, she absolutely is. And do you know what? The public en masse are behind us on this. They know they want the streets safe, and they know they want to protect the people who are keeping the streets safe. And sometimes you'll read something, it is a tiny minority who shouldn't be getting away with doing things that really shock the vast majority. So we've got to protect our police.
Absolutely, I'm a big supporter of the police. One thing I think the government should do actually is here's a policy idea that the government should do: a sentencing escalator. I feel very strongly that if somebody commits the same offence over and over again, we should have a policy in this country whereby you get a tougher punishment the second time than you got the first time, and if you commit the same offence again, you get an even tougher penalty the next time. A sentencing escalator is something that I think would be very popular with the public, and make clear to people that if you keep committing crimes, the sentence you're going to get is going to keep getting tougher and tougher. And actually, the irony is, the government have adopted this policy on breaking the rules over coronavirus. So actually, they've introduced this policy solely for this purpose. And if you keep breaching the rules on COVID, they've said you will get a bigger fine each time until you get to reach the maximum. Well, I'm not
Let's
sure about
adopt this with
not
all
sure about
crimes.
that, but
Yeah.
they're onto something with the policy,
Yes,
and we should do
definitely.
this for crimes. This should be because what happens is I think
I would say that sentence escalator has, Philip, whetted your appetite for a sentence escalator. It makes sense. If
Yes.
you are a repeat offender causing the same chaos time and time again, of course you need to serve a longer sentence, because obviously the first one didn't make you realise the error of your ways.
Exactly. I think it'd be popular with the public. It makes sense. It's for me. It's common sense. And
Is that going to be your next PMQ?
and I think well,
don't you?
it might, if I ever get called again, it might be. But I think the point is people get fed up, and police officers get fed up of
Yes.
arresting the same
Oh,
people over and over
definitely.
again. They go to court, they get a slap on the wrist, they're back out again, reoffending within minutes. So that's why a sentencing escalator would deal with some of those repeat offenders in a much better way.
I'm going to clarify something there. When you said, well, I'm not clarifying it, I'm explaining it. When you said, oh, if I ever get called again for PMQs, right? So most people don't know. If you want to ask a question at Prime Minister's Questions, it's basically a lottery. So we all put our names in every week and hope that we do get selected, and that's the way it's done. So when Philip's like, well, I might not get selected again, it's because it is all a lottery. People find that hard to believe that is how we do questions in the House, but it's meant to be fair, and that's
I was
how
very
it's
lucky.
done.
My first year in Parliament, I got selected 6 times.
Did you have a word with whoever was drawing the lots out of the?
I should have done the lottery during that time as well.
Yeah. Oh well, look. I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I hope you've enjoyed our live session from the Blue Collar Conservatism Conference. We're back tomorrow. We'll be in Birmingham, and we'll also be speaking to Michael Gove about Brexit and about COVID. So join us tomorrow.